The Lakers won't stop robbing the league. It's 2019, and the Lakers cash in all their young talent to trade for Anthony Davis, a move that brings them a title in the very first season. But then, things go pretty downhill. An injury-riddled 2021 season ends in a first-round exit to the Suns. Then they decide to trade for Russell Westbrook, but the injury struggles don't subside. They don't even make the playoffs the following season. Enter this past year. Hope was starting to get lost. Their offseason moves consisted of trading Talen Horton-Tucker and Stanley Johnson for Patrick Beverley, signing Juan Toscano-Anderson, Thomas Bryant, Lonnie Walker, Dennis Schroeder, but they also lost Malik Monk to the Kings. They opened the year with a starting lineup of Beverley, Westbrook, Walker, LeBron, and Anthony Davis. Off the bench, it was Toscano-Anderson, Austin Reaves, Kendrick Nunn, and Falcons legend Matt Ryan. It's insane that this was less than a year ago. The orchestrator of this lineup was Lakers GM Rob Pelinka, someone who didn't have that great of a reputation at this point. When he took over the job in 2017, he didn't have that much control, with Magic Johnson also holding a top front office position. The two drafted Lonzo Ball, Kyle Kuzma, Josh Hart over the next 2 years. Then Magic Johnson decided to leave the Lakers, and Pelinka now had free reign. Well, as free reign as you can have with Jeanie Buss still heavily involved. Shortly after, he would make the massive deal for Anthony Davis. A great move. But they also got extremely lucky in the draft lottery, jumping all the way to the 4th overall pick, which made things a lot easier. The move won a title, there was nothing negative to say. But his following moves, trading for Russell Westbrook, bringing in aging big names to round out this roster, and his patience in the trade market overall, started to really dampen his public perception, even though most of these moves were heavily influenced by both ownership and this team star duo of LeBron and AD. This public perception is worth noting when you look at the events that unfolded, both leading up to and throughout this season. The Lakers kicked off the year losing 5 straight. They would go on to start the season 2-10. This was concerning. This team wasn't injured. LeBron and AD were out there. By now they had relegated Westbrook to the bench, but that wasn't helping much. Things would get a little better. They really couldn't get much worse. LeBron and AD started to play really well individually, but things were still not great. So when this happens,
Adrian, what just happened?
Max, yes, Kyrie Irving and his representative, his agent, should tell you, Irving told the Nets that they want to trade. They want to trade ahead of.
Lakers fans are pleading with Pelinka to make the trade for Kyrie. The only problem? It's going to take something along the lines of Austin Reaves, Russell Westbrook, and multiple first-round picks. Yes, those were the types of packages being talked about at the time to bring in Kyrie with only months left on his contract. Even bringing him in didn't guarantee them much. This team had a roster problem, not a top-end talent problem. Pelinka didn't bring a competitive offer to the table, and Kyrie was off to Dallas. Twitter is now filled with depressed Lakers fans that feel like the season is over. But man, they underestimated Rob Pelinka. What unfolds next will go down in the record books. Well, actually, the first move came a couple weeks prior. The Lakers sent Kendrick Nunn and 3 second-round picks, practically nothing, in exchange for Rui Hachimura, the Wizards' 9th overall pick in 2019, on the last year of his rookie deal, but was still going to be a restricted free agent following. This wasn't the Lakers bringing in some great young talent for the future that was showing a ton of promise. Not at all, hence the price he went for. At the time, he was averaging 13 points and 4 rebounds. This trade was really just turning a guard into needed depth in the front court. That felt like it. There was a real chance this was just a pickup for the season. This wasn't going to move the needle, everyone knew that, but when it happened, the Kyrie deal still hadn't. Lakers Nation is still filled with hope and excitement that's about to be ripped apart. Once Kyrie comes off the board, we go into the trade deadline seeing little the Lakers could do to really turn things around. Sure, they could make a couple small moves, get a little bit better, but a team with LeBron and AD has way higher expectations than that. But then deadline day kicks off and the Lakers do the unthinkable. The first trade comes in a 3-team deal, a deal that would completely change the course of their season. They send out Damian Jones, Juan Toscano-Anderson, Russell Westbrook, a 2027 first with a top 4 protection, and 2 second-round picks. Sounds like a lot, but the only thing that was really notable was that first-round pick. In return, they received Malik Beasley, D'Angelo Russell, and Jared Vanderbilt. Malik Beasley and Vanderbilt were valuable role players for the Jazz all year. They played a massive role in Utah having the early season success they did. Those felt like great pickups. But the most notable part of this deal was the addition of D'Angelo Russell and the addition by subtraction of Russell Westbrook. D'Angelo Russell comes with his flaws, but the team desperately needed shooting, and they swapped out someone that shot 41% from the field and less than 30% from 3. If you weren't aware, that's atrocious for someone that was shooting 47% from the field and 39% from 3 at high volume. If you weren't aware, That's pretty darn good. But their trade deadline wasn't even over. In a deal that would go on to become a 14 deal, the Lakers would give up Patrick Beverley and Thomas Bryant, and in return, received Mo Bamba, Devin Reed, and 3 second-rounders. Another deal that's most notable for its addition by subtraction, in this case, Patrick Beverley. Both him and Westbrook were just not great fits whatsoever. He was averaging 6 points on terrible efficiency. Thomas Bryant had been solid for them, but they were still getting a big back in return with Mo Bamba, who was a top pick in the draft not too long ago. Everyone was of the belief the Lakers had an incredible deadline. It was nearly impossible to suggest otherwise. They unloaded the bad fits on this roster, one of which was on a massive $40 million contract, and basically turned a singular, lightly protected 2027 first into D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, Rui, and Mo Bamba. A masterclass highway robbery, and that was clear from day one. Recent events likely cloud our memory. Let's take a second to think about just how crazy what is about to happen is. Following the deadline, the Lakers are 5 games below 500. They have a record of 25-30. For perspective, they were the 13th seed in the West. The Thunder, Jazz, Blazers, they're all ahead of them. The only teams with worse records, the San Antonio Spurs and the Houston Rockets. Teams in the middle of a race to the bottom. The Lakers have one, if not the greatest player in the history of the game who was healthy. He had played over 40 games to this point. Oh, and Anthony Davis. But then after all the moves, right after the deadline, things are going great. The Lakers win 4 of the next 5. But then something happens that completely shifts the excitement. On February 26th, in a game against the Dallas Mavericks, I heard a pop. LeBron suffers a foot injury, an injury that was going to put him at risk of missing the entire rest of the regular season. A situation they could not afford. They didn't even have a play-in spot locked up, not even close. To add insult to injury, well, injury to injury, D'Angelo Russell got hurt the previous game. It was fair to feel like the season was over. It was a good deadline, but there were still serious question marks surrounding this roster, and that roster was now a hobbled one. Luckily, they managed to hold it together. Over the next 13 games, they had a respectable 8-5 record. A couple extremely promising things were coming out of this LeBron-less run. Jared Vanderbilt was dominating defensively. Not just that, but he had taken this team to defensive heights they hadn't seen since their title run. His versatility, ability to guard in the paint and on the perimeter, allowed Anthony Davis to play as the roamer, a role he's most effective in. D'Angelo Russell returned after a 6-game absence. He was averaging 22 points and 7 assists, shooting over 40% from 3. This team's 6th man, their undrafted free agent pickup from just the year prior, Austin Reaves, was averaging 18-6 on great efficiency. In the last 3 games of this stretch, he was now a starter. But this team still faced a serious problem. They might not even make the play-in. On March 27th, they still hadn't made it to 500. They sat with a 37-38 record. At the time, it would have been good enough for the play-in, but barely. They sat tied for the 9th seed with OKC, but just behind them was Dallas, who also had 37 wins and had played an additional game. Utah was also just 2 games behind them, but luckily, they were focused on draft position by this point and weren't really a threat. But of these 37-win teams, Los Angeles, OKC, and Dallas, only 2 of them were going to make the play-in. Only 8 games were left. Every single one was extremely important. With the season on the line, LeBron decides to return. This really shows the team's desperation at the time. This wasn't a tiny injury. He had suffered a torn tendon in his foot. Upon his return, he said that doctors told him he had healed from the injury faster than they've ever seen. There might be a reason for that, but that's a conversation for another day. He even said that multiple doctors recommended surgery following the injury, but that would have knocked him out for the season, and that wasn't an option. He didn't just not get surgery. He returned to the court just 4 weeks after. Under normal circumstances, he would have been out for much longer, but these weren't normal circumstances. LeBron's return came in a loss to the Bulls, but from that point on, they would only drop a singular game, going 6-1. Their season is not over. But something interesting was also happening in this run. LeBron's return didn't change Austin Reaves' new role in the starting lineup, and he wasn't slowing down. As a starter, he was now averaging 18-6 on 57-49 splits. He was now a legit option for this team going into the play-in where they held the top seed. In that play-in game, they would face off against the Minnesota Timberwolves. They win, they're the 7th seed and face off against the Grizzlies in round 1. They lose, they play again for a chance at the 8th seed where they would match up with the Denver Nuggets. They would narrowly take down Minnesota, and we got to see our first iteration of their playoff rotation. The starters, Russell, Reaves, LeBron, Vanderbilt AD. Off the bench, Schroeder, Rui, Troy Brown, Malik Beasley. A rotation that was about to be subject to some serious change. The playoffs start, and the Lakers open with a victory over the Grizzlies, but this was a very interesting game that opened the eyes to many. Austin Reaves was making his playoff debut. For Rui, it was just his second playoff appearance. They were the Lakers' top 2 scorers that night. Reaves put up 23, Rui 29 off the bench, going 11 for 14 from the field and 5 for 6 from 3. Things are about to get interesting. From this point on, Rui's minutes get cranked up, shrinking the rotation and effectively eliminating the role of Malik Beasley. It only took 6 games for the Lakers to take down Memphis. They were now a real threat. They had a rotation. They had both Reaves and D'Angelo Russell running the pick and roll with AD, taking the pressure off LeBron. AD was looking like the best defender on the planet, especially considering we just saw him matched up with the reigning Defensive Player of the Year. In the second round, they face off with the reigning NBA champion Golden State Warriors. They come to the series with a unique game plan to try and slow down Steph Curry, put their starting power forward on him, Jared Vanderbilt, a decision that initially showed some promise. In Game 1, Curry was held to pedestrian numbers, and the Lakers stole a game on the Warriors' home court. A tough feat for any team all season. Despite the Warriors struggling as a whole on the year compared to expectations, they were still one of the most dominant teams in the league at home. They were coming into the series with a better seed. The Lakers were gonna have to steal a game away in order to advance. They got that out of the way from the jump. By the end of Game 4, the Lakers held a commanding lead. They were up 3-1, but the Curry stopper strategy, that was long gone. In fact, Vanderbilt only played 11 minutes in Game 4. D'Angelo Russell had been struggling all series, leading to increased reliability on Dennis Schroeder coming off the bench. We also saw a new character unlocked, Lonnie Walker, someone that had been absent from the rotation basically the entire playoffs up until this point. Malik Beasley and Troy Brown didn't even see the court in Game 4. These were 2 guys expected to have significant roles just weeks prior. Now it's Lonnie Walker getting 27 minutes off the bench and actually coming up massively in the 4th quarter to secure the win, including this shot. A Game 6 victory was enough for the Lakers to win the series. They advanced to the Western Conference Finals. LeBron's 5th ring was starting to feel like a real possibility. Now, even from Game 1 to 4, this rotation was completely changing, something we don't usually see from eventual champions. Vanderbilt had gone from the Curry stopper at the start of the series to only playing 4 minutes by the end. He was out of the starting lineup. His presence was replaced with Dennis Schroeder. In the Western Conference Finals, they would match up with the Denver Nuggets, the eventual champions, where they would get swept, losing in just 4 games. Some of the games were close, but there was a glaring issue. AD had been dominating the entire playoffs on defense. Up until this point, he was unquestionably the top defender in the playoffs. But the success he had as the roamer alongside Vanderbilt, that was starting to be less of an option. Vanderbilt's role was shrinking, putting more and more responsibility on AD's shoulders. But now he's going from matching up against a team that lost its starting center in Kevon Looney to now the best player in the league, the 2-time MVP Nikola Jokic, embarrassing everyone in his path. The series was defined by the Lakers' struggles to match up with him. Vanderbilt was back in the starting lineup by Game 2. They needed all the size they could get. That wasn't working. We had seen some okay success with Rui on Jokic, so by Game 4, they had hit desperation mode. Rui was now in the starting lineup. Off the bench, they were bringing in Tristan Thompson. Yes, Tristan Thompson. He hadn't been on a team all season. He was working as an analyst with ESPN. The Lakers only signed him just ahead of the playoffs. At this point, they were willing to try anything. He was a big body, and in his 14 minutes, he held up pretty decently. But clearly, it didn't matter. Funnily enough, shortly after, he was back on ESPN talking about guarding Jokic, referencing his brief 14 minutes as an example. Now, this was a disappointing end, but far from a disappointing season for the Lakers. They went from being a dumpster fire. They faced LeBron breaking the scoring record, being the only somewhat notable part of their season. They were on the brink of missing the play-in. Lakers fans are throwing a temper tantrum at the decision not to trade for Kyrie. But a Pelinka trade deadline masterclass turns into a late season run and eventually a trip to the Western Conference Finals. The Bucks and Celtics lost to the 8th seed. The Lakers beat the reigning champions and lost to the eventual champs. This was a team only formed months prior at the deadline. The Nuggets had the foundation of their group for 7+ years. Some also tend to forget, but this run didn't happen like we all expected. In large part, it was due to jumps from role players, most notably Austin Reaves, who was definitely not a role player anymore. We weren't seeing the playoff LeBron we had come to know. For most of the regular season, he was his usual self, despite being one of the oldest players in the league at 38. In the 26 games leading up to taking home the all-time scoring title, he was dominating, averaging 33, 8, and 8, shooting 54% from the field. That LeBron is not the same one we saw in the playoffs. He averaged just over 24 points, really struggling behind the arc, only shooting 26% from 3. He was still undoubtedly one of the best players on the planet, but there was a real chance we weren't seeing a healthy LeBron. Maybe if he had more time to return from the foot injury, things could have gone differently. But following their playoff exit, that was the last thought on this front office's mind. LeBron's hinting at retirement right after the game, and this newly built, really promising roster has a chance to completely fall apart. Austin Reaves' breakout now has him headed to a payday. He's a restricted free agent. Rui's gone from a depth addition to a valuable piece to this franchise going forward. He's also hitting restricted free agency. D'Angelo Russell, Dennis Schroeder, Lonnie Walker, Malik Beasley, they're all unrestricted free agents hitting the open market. The only guarantees within this rotation are LeBron, AD, and Vanderbilt, assuming LeBron doesn't retire. This was a scary sight for them to face. It didn't feel like there was a world where this team was going to get better. In fact, it seemed impossible. It felt like a successful offseason was going to be bringing back Reaves and Rui, even if you had to overpay them. Just hope it was really that injury that slowed down LeBron's playoff run. But then the offseason kicks off. Pelinka rolls up his sleeves, didn't take a second to sit back and look at the work of art he had pulled off at the deadline. We hit the draft.
With the 17th pick in the 2023 NBA Draft, the Los Angeles Lakers select Jalen Hood-Schifino from Indiana University.
I'm sure taking the falling Cam Whitmore was tempting, but they're still focused on the present. There wasn't going to be a role for him. Instead, they go with Jalen Hood-Schifino, another player that was consensus value at this point. Most projected the Indiana point guard to go in the lottery. He's 6'6" with a built frame and a 6'10" wingspan. He has enough size and talent to guard up and down the lineup at the NBA level. Defense feels like a guarantee, but the scoring has a ways to go. He has no problem creating looks. Making them with consistency though, that's not there. But when you look at this Lakers situation, this was an incredible selection. He brings potential day one value given his defense. If the scoring comes, you hit a home run. A risk to reward profile that made sense as free agency was still to come. The range of roles we could see for Schifino was still extremely wide. If they bring back the entire backcourt, it was going to be tough to get him out there, but he would still be a great long-term asset. But if they lose guys like Reaves or Russell, they now had a hedge. In fact, reports came out that Schifino was drafted as a potential replacement to Reaves. Okay, they had a solid draft, but that was not going to define their offseason. We head to free agency, where the first move to come through came out of complete left field, and I don't think anyone expected. They signed Miami point guard Gabe Vincent, someone that's not the most efficient scorer in the world, but brings value and impact on both ends. During Miami's run to the finals, he was averaging 13-4, shooting 38% from three. That's where most of his offensive production comes. Over half his attempts came from beyond the perimeter. In a lot of ways, he's very similar to Dennis Schroeder, and with him potentially leaving and eventually doing so, this was a great addition, an unexpected one. But given the context of Schroeder leaving, it wasn't really going to change the outlook very much. But then we saw some other interesting deals come through. One-year contracts for Taurean Prince and Cam Reddish. The Lakers really struggled getting their backup forwards on the court during the playoffs, mainly due to the defensive struggles of both Troy Brown and Malik Beasley. That was not ideal. Here they attack that. Prince has made a career off being a reliable 3-and-D presence. He's coming off a season averaging 9 points, shooting 38% from three. It's not a flashy pickup, maybe not even someone that ends up with a big role, but the chance he enters unplayable territory like we saw with Beasley and Brown during the playoffs is highly unlikely. Then they take a flyer on Cam Reddish, someone that in 2019 was the 10th overall pick in the draft. Just a year before that was one of the top players in the country, expected to be a top 3 pick. But things didn't go quite as expected for him. It was the incredible scoring skill at a long 6'8" frame that garnered so much attention. That never came close to expected levels. It was actually the defensive end where he had brought most of his value since coming into the league. This past season, he averaged 11 points, shooting 44% from the field and just 32% from three. It's a big name that's easy to hype up. It looks really good on a Twitter depth chart, but reality is, come the playoffs, it is pretty unlikely we see too much of Reddish. But as we said, it was just a flyer. The risk is minimal. The chance a 23-year-old takes another jump is a risk well worth taking. We saw how well it worked out last season, taking a shot on a 2019 top pick with depleted value. Why not give another crack at it? But speaking of that player that was selected just one pick ahead of Reddish in the draft, Rui Hachimura was the next deal to come through. A 3-year, $51 million contract. A good amount of money, no doubt about that. No one thought he was going to be getting that a couple months ago. But coming off a great playoff run in which he averaged a ridiculously efficient 12 points off the bench, the Lakers had to take the chance. What we saw wasn't a fluke. He was absolutely massive for them. Players like Rui are interesting. In certain scenarios where a lot of responsibility is put on them on both ends, they don't bring a lot of value. But in a scenario like the Lakers, they do. Rui's really not great at anything. He's not a great scorer, not a great defender, not a great floor spacer, but he's pretty well-rounded and most importantly, extremely versatile on both ends. Playing the 4 all the time, he was judged for his skill set at the 4. But with the Lakers, we saw something different. He ended up being the solution to a lot of their problems. The team effectively had this dual six-man position. You had Dennis Schroeder as the first guard off the bench, but it's not too hard to find someone that can fill in for either spot in the backcourt. I mean, people tend to throw around the phrase combo guard for anyone that's not 6 feet tall and can play some defense. It's a lot harder to find someone that can do that for the other positions, and ultimately, it can be a game changer. Rui had a couple big playoff games from a scoring standpoint that gained a lot of attention, but Rui is unlikely to ever be a high-volume scorer at any point. Definitely not one doing that beyond the perimeter, like we saw in Game 1 against the Grizzlies, where he knocked down 5 threes. But throughout the playoffs, he was typically the first guy off the bench. If LeBron, AD, or Vanderbilt were coming out, Rui was coming in. He could play the 3 with Vanderbilt and AD. He could play the 4 with LeBron and AD. We even saw him run the small ball 5 on multiple occasions. Is he an ideal 3? No. Is he an ideal 5? No. But in the playoffs, it becomes a game of checkers. Teams are throwing different lineups or looks at you to throw you off and attack your flaws, without the versatility to overcome them. An otherwise good roster can fall apart and get exposed. Prior to the Rui addition, the Lakers didn't have this. They were forced to sub in practically 1-to-1. If AD is coming out, Thomas Bryant in. If LeBron is out, Troy Brown in. Rui was effectively both these players from a rotation standpoint. This allowed the Lakers to bring it down to 7 main pieces during the playoffs, greatly increasing their consistency on a nightly basis. It's one of those weird situations where you've got this player that really isn't all that good, but not being that bad on either end at 3 different positions, that is valuable. Hence why he just got himself $51 million. Now this also kind of sucks. Now people are going to set these $51 million expectations on him. People saw the big playoff games, see the big contract, and now are probably going to be disappointed with his 12 points a game, especially if the Lakers are struggling. That's the unfortunate thing about this league. Sometimes contracts can really tarnish the expectations of otherwise good players. But I am really hopeful for his future. This is only his second contract. He's just 25 years old. This was a great signing. Many don't realize just how pivotal he was to that playoff run. Now at this point, locking up Rui was big, but the Lakers still had a lot to do, and after giving him that money, everything was about to get a lot tougher from this point on. Then it broke. The Lakers re-signed D'Angelo Russell to a 2-year, $37 million contract. A hefty deal for someone that really struggled from the field during the playoffs, putting up an inefficient 13 points a game. Concerning, considering he brings little outside of that. But one playoff run doesn't define his value. We saw what he did throughout the year. We saw his impact on the Lakers' late season run. When D'Angelo Russell was cooking, the Lakers looked like arguably the best team in the league. We had some stretches where it was him and Austin Reaves just going back and forth, dominating as the pick and roll ball handler on either end of the wing. Considering that LeBron was also on the court, some of these stretches were truly incredible to watch, and a big part of that was D'Angelo Russell. Again, he was only with the team since the deadline. $37 million across 2 years isn't too bad. But when it came through, the hearts of Lakers fans across the world skipped a beat. They were holding their breath. Few minded bringing back Russell, but not if that was at the expense of Austin Reaves, someone that was expected to garner a heavy payday. Reports suggested the Lakers might have to match a contract in the ballpark of $96 million in order to keep him. After the Rui deal, then the D'Lo deal, it was starting to feel like Austin Reaves might be the casualty of the offseason. But then it happened. The Lakers signed Reaves at the highest they could without matching another team's offer, a 4-year, $56 million contract. This is insane. It isn't just good the Lakers got to bring him back. This is an incredible contract. Truly, one of the best contracts in the league from day one. At face value, it might not seem that way. He averaged just 13 points a game on the season, but man, does that not tell the full story. In the Lakers playoff run, he averaged 17, 5, and 4, shooting 46% from the field, 44% from 3, and 90% from the line. 17 points a game for the Lakers, a team that has LeBron and Anthony Davis, is a lot different than 17 on the Spurs, Rockets, or Pistons, especially if we're talking about the playoffs, where he just seemed to get better and better. A big problem the Lakers ran into in their loss to the Nuggets is they just weren't getting what they had gotten from their guards. D'Angelo Russell really struggled. He averaged 6 points a game. Schroeder 7, Lonnie Walker 5. All these guys shot terrible from the field. As the lights were getting brighter, they were disappointing. Reaves was stepping up. He averaged 21 points, shooting 55% from the field and 56% from 3 in that Western Conference Finals matchup. We mentioned that combo guard gets thrown around all the time. Reaves is a combo guard. We've seen a lot of young guards ramp up their scoring production to similar levels, but most of those guys have a lack of decision making that makes their actual value a lot less than what their box score numbers suggest. Reaves, on the other hand, is a very good playmaker, especially in the pick and roll. Somewhere he also thrives as a scorer, utilizing an impressive off-the-dribble mid-range and an ability to draw contact that causes conspiracy theories about a favorable whistle. He can play off the ball. He's done that most of his time with LA. On the defensive end, he's not great, far from it, but he isn't a liability. He's not someone opposing offenses are targeting possession after possession. He brings a lot of intensity on that end, which negates a lot of his physical deficits. Once becoming a starter at the end of the season, Reaves took off. It looked like a fluke. It felt unsustainable. Every year we see a bunch of these end of the season deceiving stretches, but it just wouldn't stop. By the end of the playoffs, he left us no legitimate reason he wasn't the real deal. He was doing all this in his second season. Who knows what's in store in his future? Now, he is 25 years old. Some players are in their 6th season at that age, but that doesn't really change how impressive this was. This contract feels fair if he's the same player for the entirety of the deal. But what reason do we have to think that's the case? 12 players, 25 years or younger, average more than Reaves in the playoffs. All but Malik Monk are on max contracts. It really seems the only reason the Lakers didn't get put in a position where they have to match a big offer is there just wasn't going to be any. Teams felt the Lakers were going to match everything, so they just didn't even waste their time. What a win. But they weren't even done. They decided to keep loading up on those 2019 top 10 picks. They had the 10th pick in Reddish, they had the 9th pick at Rui, go get the 8th overall pick to the Pelicans, Jackson Hayes. Someone that has shown a lot of flashes throughout his 4 seasons, but he is coming off a season where he averaged just 13 minutes, 5 points, and 3 rebounds. There's a very real chance, like we were saying with Reddish, that come the end of the season, he is not a big part of this team, but there's little to no commitment here. If things do go right, they get their needed big body that was their detriment at the end of the playoffs. So here's what's happened. From the Lakers playoff group, they lost Troy Brown, Malik Beasley, but only Schroeder and Walker from their rotation. They replaced them with Gabe Vincent and Taurean Prince, comparable, if not a better duo. That alone would have them as the biggest winners of free agency, considering the players they were able to retain, but they also added some high upside flyers in Reddish and Hayes. Oh, and one of the top guard prospects in the draft they got in the middle of the first round. So many of these moves, even the small ones, you eliminate and things look completely different. If it's Hayes but Rui walks, man, would you need Hayes to turn things around. They lose Schroeder but don't get Vincent. They have little to no flexibility. They're stuck with Russell. They're likely forced into giving too big of a role to their rookie. Now they're in this situation where Vincent and Russell are practically interchangeable in the starting unit. In fact, you could have both of them come off the bench. I don't think either one of them is the guaranteed starter come the playoffs. Then if they get anything from Shafino early, that's just a bonus. If they don't get Prince, serious question marks surround their wing depth. If they don't bring back Reaves, well, that's a pretty obvious one. He was their 3rd best player in the playoffs and by a wide margin. They needed everything to go right and somehow exceeded expectations. What's really fascinating about this team right now is since Anthony Davis' arrival, the goal has been focused on the season at hand. The rotations were filled with old veterans, Rondo, Carmelo, Dwight, Westbrook, Pat Bev. Seemingly out of nowhere, they've got this ascending young group. Reaves, Rui, Jared Vanderbilt, Shafino. That is a solid group that not only makes things interesting in terms of potential trades if the Lakers are struggling, but we also just assume what the Lakers are getting from these guys. Rui and especially Reaves are likely far from the end of their development. Another big jump from either could completely change the situation at hand. This team might also need the youth. The LeBron era is coming to a conclusion, likely at the end of the season. Not only is he 38 years old, but this is the last year of his contract, coinciding with his son Brody coming into the NBA, someone he's made it very, very clear he wants to play with and likely will. At the same time, Anthony Davis is on the last year of his contract. LeBron's departure could likely be followed shortly after by Davis. Without a sign and trade scenario, they could be getting nothing back for these two, a scenario that a year ago looked like it could lead to a group of Austin Reaves and Max Christie. If they ended up making one of those trades Lakers fans were screaming for, they could have that group with also very little control of their draft capital. I'm sure over the last few years, there was a few scenarios like that were very tempting, but Pelinka was patient. The Pelicans have the right to the Lakers pick next season, or they could decide to take their 2025 first. That's from the Anthony Davis trade. The only pick they've given up since then is that top 4 protected first in 2027. They are not in a terrible position. There's not really this doomsday scenario down the road, at least compared to a team like Phoenix. Now, the Lakers are blessed. Few markets are capable of just signing the best player on the planet in free agency, especially when that team is super young, coming off 3 second overall picks in the draft. The front office doesn't deserve all the credit, but what they have done to what felt like a sinking ship over the last couple years is something that needs to be hung up in rafters and talked about in schools one day. Pelinka is giving Presti a run for his money.